gesturing to the door. "Yes." Carcassy rapped his fist against the shutter and listened. After a moment, he rapped again, harder. "Euphrati? Euphrati, are you there?" The shutter slid open, and the scent of body warmth spilled out into the cool corridor. Carcassy was face to face with a lean young man, naked but for a pair of half-buttoned army fatigue pants. The man was sinewy and tough, hard-bodied and hard-faced. He had numerical tattoos on his upper arms and metal tags on a chain around his neck. "What?" he snapped at Carcassy. "I want to see Euphrati." "Piss off," the soldier replied. "She doesn't want to see you." Carcassy backed away a step. The soldier was physically intimidating. "Cool down," said Loken, looming behind Carcassy and lowering his hood. He stared down at the soldier. "Cool down, and I won't ask your name and unit." The soldier looked up at Loken with wide eyes. She's not here," he said. Loken pushed past him. The soldier tried to block him, but Loken caught his right wrist in one hand and turned it neatly so that the man suddenly found himself contorted in a disabling lock. "Don't do that again," Loken advised, and released his hold, adding a tiny shove that dropped the soldier onto his hands and knees. The room was quite small and very cluttered. Discarded clothes and rumpled bedding littered the floor space, and the shelves and low table were covered with bottles and unwashed plates. Keeler stood on the far side of the room, beside the unmade cot. She had pulled a sheet around her slim, naked body and stared at Loken with disdain. She looked weary, unhealthy. Her hair was tangled, and there were dark shadows under her eyes. "It's all right, Leaf," she told the soldier. "I'll see you later." Still wary, the soldier pulled on his vest and boots, snatched up his jacket, and left, casting one last murderous look at Loken. "He's a good man," Keeler said. "He cares for me." "Army?" "Yes. It's called fraternization. Does Ignace have to be here for this?" Carcassy was hovering in the doorway. Loken turned. "Thank you for your help," he said. "I'll see you tomorrow." Carcassy nodded. "All right," he said. Reluctantly, he walked away. Loken closed the shutter. He looked back at Keeler. She was pouring clear liquor from a flask into a shot glass. "Can I interest you?" he asked, gesturing with the flask. "In the spirit of hospitality?" He shook his head. "I suppose you Astartes don't drink. Another biological flaw ironed out of you?" "We drink well enough, under certain circumstances." "And this isn't one, I suppose?" Keeler put the flask down and took up her glass. She walked back to the cot, holding the sheet around her with one hand and sipping from the glass held in the other. Holding her drink out steady, she settled herself down on the cot, drawing her legs up and folding the sheet modestly over herself. "I can imagine why you're here, Captain," she said. "I'm just amazed. I expected you weeks ago." "I apologize. I only found the second file tonight. I obviously hadn't looked carefully enough." "What do you think of my work?" "Astonishing. I'm flattered by the pics you shot on the embarkation deck. I meant to send you a note, thanking you for copying them to me. Again, I apologize. The second file, however, is problematic," he suggested. "At the very least," he said. "Why don't you sit down?" he asked. Loken shrugged off his robe and sat carefully on a metal stool beside the cluttered table. "I wasn't aware any pics existed of that incident," Loken said. "I didn't know I'd shot them," Keeler replied, taking another sip. "I'd forgotten, I think. When the first captain asked me at the time, I said no, I hadn't taken anything. I found them later. I was surprised." "Why did you send them to me?" he asked. He shrugged. "I don't really know. You have to understand, sir, that I was traumatized. For a while I was in a very bad way. The shock of it all. I was a mess, but I got through it. I'm content now, stable, centered. My friends helped me through it. Ignace, Sadie, some others. They were kind to me. They stopped me from hurting myself." "Hurting yourself?" She fiddled with her glass, her eyes focused on the floor. "Nightmares, Loken. Terrible visions. When I was asleep and when I was awake. I found myself crying for no reason. I drank too much. I acquired a small pistol and spent long hours wondering if I had the strength to use it. She looked up at him. It was in that pit of despair that I sent you those pics. It was a cry for help, I suppose. I don't know. I can't remember. Like I said, I'm past that now. I'm fine. I feel a little foolish for bothering you, especially as my efforts took so long to reach you. You wasted a visit. I'm glad you feel better, Loken said. But I haven't wasted anything. We need to talk about those images. Who's seen them? No one. You and me, no one else. Did you not think it wise to inform the first captain of their existence? Keeler shook her head. No, not at all. Not back then. If I'd gone to the authorities, they'd have confiscated them, destroyed them probably, and told me the same story about a wild beast. The first captain was very certain it was a wild beast, some Xenos creature, and he was very certain I should keep my mouth shut, for the sake of morale. The Picts were a lifeline for me back then. They proved I wasn't going mad. That's why I sent them to you. Am I not part of the authorities? She laughed. You were there, Loken. You were there. You saw it. I took a chance. I thought you might respond and... And what? Tell me the truth of it. Loken hesitated. Oh, don't worry, he admonished, rising to refill her glass. I don't want to know the truth now. A wild beast, I've got over it. This late in the day, Captain, I don't expect you to break loyalty and tell me something you're sworn not to tell. It was a foolish notion, which I now regret. My turn to apologize to you. She looked over at him, hugging up the edge of the sheet to cover her bosom. I've deleted my copies. All of them. You have my word. The only ones that exist are the ones I sent to you. Loken took out the data slate and placed it on the table. He had to push dirty crockery aside to make a space for it. Keeler looked at the slate for a long while, and then knocked back her glass and refilled it. Imagine that, she said, her hand trembling as it lifted the flask. I'm terrified even to have them back in the room. I don't think you're as over it as you like to pretend, Loken said. Really? Yeah. She put down her glass and ran the fingers of her free hand through her short blonde hair. Hell with it, then, since you're here. Hell with it. She walked over and snatched up the slate. Wild beast, eh? Wild beast. Some form of vicious predator, indigenous to the mountain region that... Forgive me, that's so much shit, she said. She snapped the slate into the reader slot of a compact edit engine on the far side of the room. Some of her pictures and spare lenses littered the bench beside it. The engine whirred into life, and the screen lit up, cold and white. What did you make of the discrepancies? Discrepancies? Loken asked. Yes. She expertly tapped commands into the engine's controls and selected the file. With a stab of her index finger, she opened the first image. It bloomed on the screen. Terror, I can't look at it, she said, turning away. Switch it off, Keeler. No, you look at it. Look at the visual distortion there. Surely you noticed that. It's like it's there, and yet not there. Like it's phasing in and out of reality. A signal error. The conditions in the poor light foxed your pictor's sensors, and... I know how to use a pictor, Captain. And I know how to recognize poor exposure, lens flare, and digital malformance. That's not it. Look. She punched up the second pict and half looked at it, gesturing with her hand. Look at the background. And the droplets of blood in the foreground there. Perfect pict capture. But the thing itself. I've never seen anything create that effect on a high-gain instrument. That wild beast is out of sync with the physical continuity around it. Which is, Captain, exactly as I saw it. You've studied these closely, no doubt. No, said Loken. Keeler pulled up another image. She stared at it fully this time, and then looked away. There, you see? The after image. It's on all of them, but this is the clearest. I don't see. I'll boost the contrast and lose a little of the motion blurring. She fiddled with the engine's controls. There. See now? Loken stared. What had at first seemed to be a frothy, milky ghost blurring across the image of the nightmare thing had resolved clearly, thanks to her manipulation. Superimposed on the fuzzy abomination was a semi-human shape, echoing the pose and posture of the creature. Though it was faint, there was no mistaking the shrieking face and racked body of Xavier Jubal. "Know him?" he asked. "I don't, but I recognize the physiognomy and build of an Astartes when I see it. Why would my pictor register that, unless—" Loken didn't reply. Keeler switched the screen off, popped out the slate and tossed it back to Loken. He caught it neatly, drew him back over to the cot and flopped down. "That's what I wanted you to explain to me," he said. "That's why I sent you the Picts. When I was in my deepest, darkest pits of madness, that's what I was hoping you'd come and explain to me. But don't worry. I'm past that now. I'm fine. A wild beast. That's all it was. A wild beast." Loken gazed at the slate in his hand. He could barely imagine what Keeler had been through. It had been bad enough for the rest of them, but he and Nero and Cinderman had all enjoyed the benefit of proper closure. They'd been told the truth. Keeler hadn't. She was smart and bright and clever, and she'd seen the holes in the story, the awful inconsistencies that proved there had been more to the event than the first captain's explanation. And she'd managed with that knowledge, coped with it, alone. "What do you think it was?" he asked. "Something awful that we should never know about," he replied. "Throne, Loken, please don't take pity on me now. Please don't decide to tell me." "I won't," he said. "I can't. It was a wild beast. Euphrati, how did you deal with it?" "What do you mean?" "You say you're fine now. How are you fine?" "My friends helped me through. I told you." Loken got up, picked up the flask, and went over to the cot. He sat down on the end of the mattress and refilled the glass she held out. "Thank you," he said. "I found strength. I found—" For a moment, Loken was certain she had been about to say faith. "What?" "Trust. Trust in the Imperium. In the Emperor. In you." "In me?" "Not you personally. In the Astartes, in the Imperial Army, in every branch of mankind's warrior force that is dedicated to the protection of us mere mortals." She took a sip and sniggered. "The Emperor, you see, protects." "Of course he does," said Loken. No, you misunderstand," said Keeler, folding her arms around her raised, sheet-covered knees. "He actually does. He protects mankind, through the legions, through the martial corps, through the war machines of the Mechanicum. He understands the dangers, the inconsistencies. He uses you and all the instruments like you to protect us from harm, to protect our physical bodies from murder and damage, to protect our minds from madness, to protect our souls. This is what I now understand. This is what this trauma has taught me, and I am thankful for it. There are insane dangers in the cosmos, dangers that mankind is fundamentally unable to comprehend, let alone survive. So, he protects us. There are truths out there that would drive us mad by one fleeting glimpse of them. So, he chooses not to share them with us. That's why he made you." "That's a glorious concept," Loken admitted. "In the Whisperheads, that day, you saved me, didn't you? You shot that thing apart. Now you save me again, by keeping the truth to yourself. Does it hurt?" "Does what hurt?" "The truth you keep hidden." "Sometimes," he said. "Remember, Garviel, the Emperor is our truth and our light. If we trust in him, he will protect." "Where did you get that from?" Loken asked. "A friend. Garviel, I have only one concern. A lingering thing that will not quit my mind. You Astartes are loyal, through and through. You keep to your own and never break confidence. And? Tonight, I really believe you would have told me something, but for the loyalty you keep with your brothers. Admire that, but answer me this. How far does your loyalty go? Whatever it was happened to us in the Whisperheads. I believe an Astartes brother was part of it. But you close ranks. What has to happen before you forsake your loyalty to the Legion and recognize your loyalty to the rest of us? I don't know what you mean, he said. Yes, you do. If a brother turns on his brothers again, will you cover that up too? How many have to turn before you act? One? A squad? A company? How long will you keep your secrets? What will it take for you to cast aside the fraternal bonds of the Legion and cry out, "This is wrong"? You're suggesting an impossible... No, I'm not. You of all people know I'm not. If it can happen to one, it can happen to others. You're all so drilled and perfect and identical. You march to the same beat and do whatever is asked of you. Loken, do you know of any Astartes who would break step? Would you? Would you? If you saw the rot, a hint of corruption, would you step out of your regimented life and stand against it? For the greater good of mankind, I mean. It's not going to happen, Loken said. That would never happen. You're suggesting civil disunity, civil war. That is against every fibre of the Imperium as the Emperor has created it. With Horus as War Master, as our guiding light, such a possibility is beyond countenance. The Imperium is firm and strong, and of one purpose. There are inconsistencies, Euphrati, just like there are wars and plagues and famines. They hurt us, but they do not kill us. We rise above them and move onwards. It rather depends, he remarked, where those inconsistencies occur. Loken's vox cuff suddenly began to bleat. Loken raised his wrist and thumbed the call stud. I'm on my way, he said. He looked back at her. Let's talk again, Euphrati, he said. She nodded. He leant forwards and kissed her on the forehead. Be well. Be better. Look to your friends. Are you my friend? He asked. Know it, he said. He got up and retrieved his robe from the floor. Garviel, he called from the cot. Yes. Delete those images, please. Me. They don't need to exist. He nodded, opened the shutter, and stepped out into the chill of the hall. Once the shutter had closed, Keeler got up off the cot and let the sheet fall from her. Naked, she padded over to a cupboard, knelt and opened its doors. From inside she took out 2 candles and a small figurine of the Emperor. She placed them on the top of the cupboard and lit the candles with an igniter. Then he rummaged in the cupboard and pulled out the dog-eared pamphlet that Leaf had given her. It was a cheap, crude thing, badly pressed from a mechanical bulk printer. There were ink soils along its edges, and rather a lot of spelling mistakes in the text. Keeler didn't care. She opened the first page and, bowed before the makeshift shrine, she began to read. The Emperor of mankind is the light and the way, and all his actions are for the benefit of mankind, which is his people. The Emperor is God, and God is the Emperor. So it is taught in the Lectitia Divinitatis, and above all things, the Emperor will protect. Loken ran down the companionways of the Remembrance's billet wing, his cloak billowing out behind him. Sirens were sounding. Men and women peered out of doorways to look at him as he passed by. He raised his cuff to his mouth. Nero, report. Is it Tarek? Has something happened? The vox crackled, and Vipers's voice issued tinnily from the cuff speaker. Something's happened, all right, Garvey. Get back here. What? What's happened? A ship, that's what. A battle barge has just translated in system behind us. It's Sanguinius. Sanguinius himself has come.